Hello, my dear friends. I have thousands of Svarim in my library. You see behind me are my Svarim. I love my Svarim, but I have a special section in my library for Haggadahs. I have a particular love for Haggadahs, so much so that I'm afraid to walk into a Svarim store because I see more Haggadahs. There's thousands of Haggadahs. I just can't control myself and not buy them. What's so special about Haggadahs? It's because, each Haggadah is the same text. So why do I need more Haggadahs? Do you think it's because I have one that has a green cover and one has an orange cover? What's different is the commentary. Every commentary is different, and each author wrote a commentary based, I think, primarily on their experiences that they had at their Seder, and that gave them different insight into Haggadah. Why did they have different experiences? It's because even though Torah is the text of Torah is the same for everybody. It's the same Chumash, the same Nach, it's the same Mishnah, the same Gemara, but each person sees Torah differently because Torah is compared to light, Torah or. And just like light, there's a spectrum, there's a rainbow of colors that are contained within the light. So a person studies Torah through the prism of their neshama, and it studies Torah and performs mitzvahs through the prism of their neshama. And a person's neshama is formed by their life experiences, and we've experienced different things, and therefore we relate to different parts of. That's why Torah is so relevant. We call the Torah's Chaim. It's alive because it's not ancient history. It's something that we're able to relate to our life experiences. And as we study the Haggadah every year, we see in the Haggadah, we should be able to see in the Haggadah ways of relating it to our own life experiences. If you ever had a Holocaust survivor for Pesach at the Seder, the Holocaust survivor sees every line of Haggadah. He sees the Holocaust. He sees the period of whether they were in the concentration camps, and then the period of liberation. And the Haggadah talks about Avad Mayinu, and then the Geula, the redemption, because that's his life experience. So that's what he's able to see in Haggadah. There never was such a difficult experience for most of us, those of us who were born after the Holocaust. Since the Holocaust, the Jewish people have not experienced as much trauma as they have had in the last year and a half. Last year was a half a year after October 7th. Now it's a year and a half, and the trauma continues, and it keeps on getting worse and more difficult. And there's more lives that have been lost, and more soldiers who have been wounded, and more pain and more suffering. When we study the Haggadah, we have to take the Haggadah, the ancient text of the Haggadah, and make it come alive and make it relevant to our lives today. In the Haggadah it says, if you tell the Haggadah, if you elaborate on Haggadah, it's praiseworthy. What's there to elaborate? What are you going to say? I remember when I was in Mitzrayim, the Egyptians were wearing this colored clothing, and I was dressed this way. I remember what it was like when we left Mitzrayim. We weren't there, but I would say it means because you're marba by taking the Haggadah, the ancient Haggadah, and relating it to your own life experiences, and that is not difficult. And when you're reading especially this year, when you take the Haggadah and you read the Haggadah, so much of the Haggadah is relevant to what we're going through in this period of time in our lives. You begin the Haggadah, and I'm saying my recommendation is that's what we should be looking for in the Haggadah. That's how we should be marble saper. Think about how does it relate to the experiences of the last year and a half. So that just whatever stone you turn over, you'll find something new. So the beginning of the Seder is we take 3 matzahs, and they're 3 beautiful matzahs, and you pick the matzahs from the box of matzah. You want to make sure they're not cracked and not broken. And then what do? You put them into the kara, and as soon as the Seder starts, you break the middle matzah, yachatz. It's cracked in half, and life is full of yachas. It's full of tragedy, and especially this past year and a half. I would say the most famous phrase in Haggadah is "Manishtan alayos mikol halayos." How is this night different than all previous nights? So the plain meaning of this night is all other nights means all the other nights of the year. But it could also mean how is this Pesach different than all other the nights of previous years of Pesach? So this year's Pesach is different because when we break the matzah, we could relate that to what has happened in the last year and a half, the broken lives, the shattered lives. How many women are there that are almanos, they're widows that are they're the ones that are orchestrating the seder for their family without their husbands, and how many children are orphans or their fathers are not there at the seder, and how many families are there in the families of the hostages who are thinking about their hostage, and it's just the amount of suffering and trauma is just beyond belief, and the hostage, we don't even understand how they can still be alive after a year and a half, the Haggadah is all about avadim, and the hostages are worse than avadim, because avadim, at least the masters don't want their avadim to die. They feed them. The hostages are treated in the most savage and inhumane way conceivable, and they're forced to be Lavadim. The Hamas forces them to, in Gaza, it forces them to clean the toilets or whatever, but they treat them worse than animals. And there's so much suffering, there's so much yachid, there's so much shattered lives, and it's not only in the state of Israel. I mean, in the north, there's so many thousands, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people have been displaced. They haven't been able to go home to their homes for the last year and a half. But it's the Jews worldwide. There's so much anti-Semitism, and there's so much insecurity, and even in our own country, in the college campuses, you would think that would be a place where higher education, where people shouldn't be afraid to attend university, but they're overwhelmed by the hatred that's being displayed and spewed, even on the college campuses. So that's the yachats. Things are broken. It needs to be fixed. It's shattered. And then we take the karpas, which is, we take a vegetable which has a pleasant taste, but you dip it in salt water because it represents, one of the explanations for salt water is it represents the tears, the demaos that the Jewish people had in Mitzrayim. So many tears have been shed in the last year and a half. You can't even count the tears that have been shed. And when we dip the karpas in the salt water, we should think about all the tears that the people, all the suffering that's taken place in the last year and a half. And then when we eat the maror, the bitterness of the maror, there's so much mariras in the world today, and there's so much mariras in Eretz Yisrael, and so many families are trying to cope with the bitter and the hostages. Think about the hostages. There's the extreme mariras is the hostages themselves that are sitting in captivity, unknown, not knowing what their future holds in store, and being tortured and tormented every single day. The mariras. And my father-in-law used to eat the maror. Instead of eating grated maror, he would cut up the maror into pieces, and that way was the taste of the maror was more bitter. And we'd eat the maror, and he would cry when he was eating the maror, cry tears for the bitterness. We should be crying when we eat the maror. The tears should be flowing from our eyes, because if we would be able to properly relate to the bitterness of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. So that's one. It's one side of the picture, that when the Seder, so much in the Seder should be, we should be able to relate to the tragedies that have transpired the last year and a half. But Pesach is a time of thinking about Geula. That in spite of the tragedies, the Ribono Shel Olam took us out of Mitzrayim, and we should be thinking about how they went out of Mitzrayim. The Haggadah says that Vanitzak, they cried out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they davened to Hashem, and God heard their suffering. Vayishma es kolenu, He heard our call. We want that God should hear our call. The Vanitzak during the Seder should be so strong and so powerful. The Ribono Shel Olam, and it's been our tefillos the last year and a half have been so unbelievable, and all Klal Yisrael together is unified in constant davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we have to intensify our tefillos. And then you come to the part of the Seder of Dayenu, and Dayenu is a tefillah of hakaras hatov, of appreciation. Why is Dayenu divided up into all those? It's 15 different stanzas in Dayenu. If God would have taken us out of Mitzrayim, that would have been enough. Even if He hadn't brought us to Har Sinai, if He brought us to Har Sinai, that would have been enough. Even if He didn't give us the Torah. Why do we break it up that way? It was all one long process. The answer is because when it comes to hakaras hatov, you have to appreciate every single element. Because there's a whole bunch of pieces that led up to the final. Ultimately, they came to Eretz Yisrael. But it don't make it one big glob. You have to dissect it and separate it into its different elements, the different threads. And there's been so much chesed in spite of all the suffering. There's also been so much chesed the last year and a half. There's been so many nisim and so many miracles. There were so many tens of thousands of missiles shot into Eretz Yisrael. The amount of fatalities is minuscule compared to how much it could have been. And if imagine if Hezbollah, that's what we were worried about at the beginning of the war. If Hezbollah had joined forces with Hamas then and shot, they had a much greater arsenal of missiles than Hamas. If they had shot them into Eretz Yisrael, they would have easily overwhelmed the Iron Dome system, and thousands of lives could have been lost. And they weren't, and it was nisim. And then you remember a year ago, Iran Pesach, Iran shot 3,000 missiles into Israel at one time. Again, it should have overwhelmed Israel's defense system. It didn't. Not one person was killed then. There's been so many nisim, and many of the nisim are, there's hidden miracles and there's nisim gluyim. There's open miracles. So many of the miracles that have taken place in the last year and a half been nisim gluyim, open miracles, and the Rebbeinu Shalom has protected Klal Yisrael, in spite of the fact that the worldwide anti-Semitism has been so horrific, and there's so many governments that have been anti-Israel, and even in America, we had the previous administration. They didn't support Israel. They were withholding weapons and making it difficult for Israel to defend itself. Now Israel managed to survive, and Baruch Hashem, now the administration is much more in supportive. Everything is Yad Hashem. It's through the intervention of Rebbeinu Shalom. But we have to appreciate every single element. We have to divide it into its different pieces and recognize the tremendous chesed. I think about the what happened to Hamas. Hamas was such a dangerous force, and there was mamish. This was a nes nigla. This was an open miracle that Israel was able to put bombs into the pagers and then call all the senior leaders of Hamas, and they answered their pagers at the same time, and when they answered, they all blew up in their faces, and in one fell swoop they were able to eliminate almost all the leadership of Hamas. It's mind-boggling. Okay, so you'll say it was the ingenuity of the IDF and the creativity, but everything. First, it needed tremendous coordination. All you needed is one little thing should go wrong. How did the Israelis manage to infiltrate into a company that was manufacturing the cell phones, and they planted and nobody found out about it? You just need one person to spill the beans, and the whole thing would have fallen apart. And the coordination was, timing is everything. It was like a movie. I haven't been to movies for years, but I remember the Guns of Naravon. I remember when I was a child, I saw it was how they managed to climb up the mountain and blow up the Guns of Navarone. It was just incredible. But this is even more incredible, the way it was all everything unfolded, and it all everything clicked together, and they managed the leadership of Hamas was wiped out, and Nasrallah was assassinated, and the defense system of Iran was taken out. They also such a formidable force, and they were so dramatically weakened by Israel. All these things are tremendous miracles and nisim, and so we're still in a state of trepidation, and we're still not sure what's going to happen. But when we say Dayenu, these are the things that we need to talk about, and we need to elaborate and think about how all the miracles that we're witnessing in Eretz Yisrael. And then I have a thought I want to share with you. I had a machshava, I had a thought, and I thought it's such a good thought. There has to be somebody must have said it before. It can't be that I'm the first one that thought of this. And so I started going through my hundred Haggadahs, looking for somebody that would say the same thing. I couldn't find. Finally, I found it in Haggadah by Rabbi Mintz. He's the mashkiach in the Mesivta Tiferes Yisrael, a great person. He says this. He preceded me. He thought of the idea first. Here's the thought: the maror. First we eat the maror by itself, and the maror is bitter, and it's hard to eat the maror. It's bitter, But then we take the maror and we eat korach. And korach means you put the maror in a sandwich between the two pieces of matzah. There's a concept in Kabbalah of hamtakas hadin that you have to take, that God is, there's two ways that God relates to man. There's din and chesed. The God is harsh and severe and the God of judgment. And then there's chesed. God is compassionate. And you always have to find a way to mimamtik the din, to take the din and transform it into something sweet. That phrase of hamtakas hadin comes from in Parsha Shalach. It talks about B'Shalach, it talks about they came to Mara and they couldn't drink the water from Mara because the water was bitter, and that's why it's called Mara, because it was bitter. And then Moshe took a stick and he threw it into Vayore Eitz, he threw it into the water, Vayimtiku Hamayim, the bitter water became sweet. And that's what we have to find ways through our mitzvahs that will inspire a Kadosh Baruch Hu. I don't think the word inspire is exactly right, but it means to arouse a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that the bitterness should be transformed into something sweet. So we take the two pieces of matzah, and that's hamtakas hadin. The maror is din, the maror is bitterness, the maror is severity, the maror is suffering. But we take the maror and we sandwich it between the two sides of the matzah. And when we eat the korech, we sandwich the bitterness, and we have to think about there's so much good in our lives, and we have to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to make that the goodness should overpower the bitterness. Towards the middle of the Seder, before we eat the matzah, we say the bracha Asher Golanu V'Gol Soseinu, and we should have tremendous kavanah this year when we recite the bracha. The bracha we say Asher Golanu V'Gol Soseinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeemed our fathers from Mitzrayim, and He brought us to this night of Pesach matzah, eating matzah mara. That's how this is how we want that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring us, to continue to bring us to times of redemption, and it should be a time of shalom, of peace and tranquility and simcha and joy. And so, as we're reciting that bracha, let's have this year in particular, let's have tremendous kavanah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, indeed, the message of Pesach is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that took us out of Mitzrayim, and He turned over the world in order, and there were so many tremendous miracles that took place, the Eser Makas and by Kriyas Yamsuf. Rebbeinu Shem should continue to do that, not what happened 3,500 years ago. It should be contemporary, that Rebbeinu Shem should perform all these miracles for Klal Yisrael, and the suffering should come to an end, and all the hostages should be released, and the Israeli population should be able to return to a state of normalcy, and there should be shalom in Eretz Yisrael. And that way we'll be zocha, as the end of the bracha says, we should be able to recite a shircha, a new song for our redemption and the redemption of our souls. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Yom Tov.